At Christmas dinner, my mom handed out gifts to everyone, except me. She said, "Good daughters get rewards." I opened my purse, placed a car key on the table, and said, "That's fine. I'll go get my gift outside with my new family." Christmas dinner at my mom's house was supposed to be a tradition. She insisted on cooking everything herself, even though we always offered to help. She'd complain the whole time about how tired she was, how ungrateful we were, how much she sacrificed, but she still expected all of us to show up, smile, and pretend nothing was ever wrong. This year, I almost didn't go. I had a pit in my stomach since Thanksgiving, when she made a snide comment about how I never contribute to the family, even though I was the one who paid for most of the groceries that night. But Christmas was always important to my younger brother Max, and I didn't want to make things worse for him. So I showed up, dressed nice, holding a bottle of wine and a tin of cookies I knew she wouldn't eat but would judge me for not bringing if I hadn't. Everyone else was already there when I walked in. My mom, my stepdad Ron, Max, and my cousin Lisa with her 2 kids. The air smelled like roasted turkey and too much cinnamon, and the fake cheer in the room was thick enough to choke on. Mom barely glanced up. "Oh, you came," she said, just like that. Not hello, not Merry Christmas, just a passive-aggressive jab wrapped in cold indifference. I smiled tightly. Of course I did. We ate. We exchanged the usual small talk. She criticized how I carved the ham and made a face when I said I was still freelancing. Max tried to change the subject. Lisa stayed quiet. And then came the gifts. She stood up, dramatically wiping her hands on a napkin like she was finishing a Broadway performance. "All right, time for a little something for everyone," she said, in that syrupy sweet voice she used when she wanted to feel powerful. She handed Max a new smartwatch. Lisa got a designer tote bag. Even Lisa's kids got fancy toys. Ron received a personalized grill set, and then she sat back down. No box for me, no gift bag, not even a card. I waited, thinking maybe she forgot that it was some weird oversight. She met my eyes and said, loud enough for everyone to hear, "Good daughters get rewards." The room went silent. Max looked horrified. Lisa stared at the floor. Ron pretended to sip his wine. I felt something break inside me. Not snap, break. Quietly. Like something that had been hanging on by a thread for years had finally just let go. I reached into my purse, my hand shaking slightly, and pulled out a single item, a car key. I held it up for a second, then placed it carefully on the table in front of me. "That's fine," I said, my voice steady in a way that surprised even me. "I'll go get my gift outside, with my new family." Then I stood up, took my coat, and walked out the front door. I didn't look back. Not when I heard Lisa gasp, not when Max called my name, not when I heard my mom scoff under her breath like she was the one who'd been wronged. I just kept walking to the car parked in the driveway, a white hybrid SUV with a big red bow on top. Inside, waiting for me, was someone who had taught me what real family felt like, and that night was just the beginning of everything that changed. The moment I closed the car door, a warm hand reached over and gently squeezed mine. "You okay?" Jordan asked softly. His voice had that calming steadiness I always needed after being around my mom for more than 10 minutes. I nodded, staring straight ahead, blinking fast so I wouldn't cry. "Yeah, I think I finally am." Jordan wasn't just my boyfriend. He was the first person who ever made me feel chosen. Not out of obligation, not out of guilt, but because he actually wanted me around. We'd been together for a little over a year, and even though we weren't engaged yet, his parents had already embraced me like one of their own. That car parked in my mom's driveway wasn't just some dramatic statement. It was a Christmas gift from his parents to me. After hearing what I'd been through over the years, they wanted me to feel, in their words, what it's like to be celebrated. And I was. With them, I was celebrated. "I can't believe she did that," Jordan muttered as we drove away. "Didn't even get you a card? Not even a candy cane," I said, forcing a laugh, though my chest was tight. "And then she had the audacity to say that. 'Good daughters get rewards,'" he repeated with a scoff. "What does that even mean?" "It means she's never going to forgive me for not being the puppet she wanted." He was quiet for a second. Then carefully he said, "Are you ready to tell me the whole story?" I turned to him. "What do you mean?" "I mean, I've seen the little things, the passive aggression, the favoritism, the guilt tripping, but tonight felt like the end of something, like you cut a cord that's been strangling you for a long time." He wasn't wrong. I took a deep breath. "It started when I was 12. That's the first time she told me I ruined her life." His fingers tightened around the steering wheel, but he didn't interrupt. "She had me when she was 19. No support from her family. My dad left when I was a baby, and she never let me forget that I was the reason she couldn't go to college, couldn't travel, couldn't do anything she wanted. Every time something went wrong in her life, she'd say, 'Well, I wouldn't even be in this mess if I hadn't had you.'" Jordan stayed silent, letting me speak. "So I tried harder. I got good grades. I stayed out of trouble. I tried to be perfect, thinking maybe she'd love me more if I didn't give her any reason to complain. But she still found reasons," he said softly. "Always. When I got accepted into a college out of state, she cried and said I was abandoning her. When I didn't come home one Thanksgiving because I had exams, she told the whole family I was too good for them now. But Max could do anything and still be the golden child. Even when he dropped out of school for 2 years and couch surfed, she'd say, 'He's just going through a rough patch. Be supportive.' Double standards," Jordan said. Triple. Quadruple, I replied. When I started dating you, she said I was being ungrateful, that I was trying to replace the family that raised me. And when your mom invited me to stay for Christmas last year, she went ballistic, screamed at me, said I was dead to her. Jordan was quiet for a long moment. And yet you still showed up this year. I looked out the window at the snow-covered streets because I kept thinking maybe this time would be different, that maybe she'd see me and think, wow, she turned out okay after all. But I think I've finally accepted that she doesn't want to see me at all. She wants to see who she wished I was. We pulled into Jordan's parents' driveway. The house was lit up with warm lights, and I could already hear laughter coming from inside. I turned to him. I'm sorry. I didn't mean to dump all that on you tonight. Don't apologize, he said, reaching over to brush a tear from my cheek. You've been carrying this for too long. You deserve to set it down. Inside, his mom welcomed me with a huge hug, like nothing had happened, like I wasn't the girl who just walked out on her own family, like I was home. And for the first time in a long time, I believed I was. But what I didn't know, what none of us knew, was that walking away from my mom that night would set off a chain of events that would uncover secrets I was never meant to find. The next morning, I woke up to 10 missed calls from Max, 3 voicemails, 2 texts. Call me. Please, it's about Mom. You need to come back. I stared at my phone, heart thudding, still curled up under Jordan's arm. The Christmas lights outside his window blinked softly in the early morning haze, but all I could think about was that message. Come back? After what she did? Jordan stirred beside me. Everything okay? I showed him the screen. Max says it's about my mom. Something must have happened. He sat up slowly, rubbing his eyes. You gonna call him? I hesitated. A big part of me wanted to throw the phone across the room, but the part of me that had helped raise Max when our mom couldn't be bothered, that part wouldn't let me ignore him. So I stepped outside into the cold and hit call. He answered on the first ring. Thank God. Max, what's going on? She's freaking out, he said. His voice was rushed, anxious, like really losing it. After you left last night, she started crying and saying how you betrayed the family. And this morning she's locked herself in her room. She won't eat. She won't talk to anyone but keeps saying you turned everyone against her. I closed my eyes. So she's playing the victim, as always. No, it's more than that, he said, lowering his voice. She said something weird. She kept saying, she knows, she finally knows. That made me pause. Knows what? I don't know. I asked her, but she just kept repeating it, like she thought you found something out. A cold chill crept up my spine. I didn't say anything to her except that I had a new family now. That was it. Max was quiet for a second. I think there's something she's hiding, something big. Can you come over? Just talk to her? Maybe if she hears it from you. I'm not walking back into that house, I said firmly. Not after the way she humiliated me. He sighed. Okay, I get it. But if I find out what she meant, will you listen? Yeah, I'll listen. We hung up, and I stood there on the porch, the winter air biting at my skin, thinking about her words. She knows. What did she think I knew? That question haunted me the entire day. Later, while Jordan and I were helping his mom take down some decorations, she handed me a worn photo album. Found this in the attic while cleaning, she said with a warm smile. I thought you might like it. There's a picture of Jordan as a baby in here where he looks exactly like a grumpy little potato. I laughed and took it, grateful for the distraction. But when I opened the album, something slid out and fell to the floor. It was a photo. Old. Faded. A woman holding a baby in front of a small blue house. Not Jordan's mom, not Jordan. Me. And not just me. Her. My mom. Only... she looked different, younger than in any other picture I'd ever seen. She was smiling, genuinely smiling, and standing beside her was a man I didn't recognize, tall, with kind eyes, one hand resting protectively on her shoulder. I turned the photo over. There was a date, April 3rd, 1999, and one word in unfamiliar handwriting. Ours. I stared at it for a long time, my heartbeat thundering, because that wasn't the apartment we lived in when I was born, and that man definitely wasn't my father. Jordan? I called softly. Can I ask you something weird? Always. Did your mom know my mom before we met? He looked confused. No, I don't think so. Why? I showed him the photo. He blinked. Wait, that house, that's down the road from my grandparents' old place. I remember the porch. And just like that, a door in my mind creaked open. Memories I thought were dreams. A blue porch swing, the smell of coffee, someone singing softly in the background, began to feel real. I suddenly wasn't sure of anything anymore. Not who that man was. Not what my mother was hiding. And especially not what would happen when I finally decided to confront her. That photo sat on my lap the entire ride back to my apartment. I couldn't stop staring at it. My mom, holding me like I was the most precious thing in the world, smiling like someone who hadn't been broken yet. And beside her, the man I had never seen before, but who looked at her like he knew her, really knew her. And the word on the back, ours. Not mine, not hers, ours. Jordan had offered to come with me when I told Max, but I needed to do this alone. I had 1,000 theories spinning in my head, and all of them terrified me. I walked into the coffee shop where Max and I agreed to meet. He was already there, looking anxious, sipping nervously from a paper cup. When he saw me, he stood. Hey, thanks for coming. I brought something, I said, sliding the photo across the table. He looked down, puzzled. Then his eyes widened. Where did you get this? It fell out of an old photo album. Jordan's mom gave it to me. His fingers hovered over the image. That's Mom, but that's not Dad. Nope. And that's not our old apartment either. Max sank back into his chair, stunned. So what does this mean? I hesitated. I think she lied to us about who my real father is. Max looked up slowly. Your father? I nodded. That photo is dated before she ever met Ron. And if that's the house near Jordan's grandparents, then we lived somewhere else before everything we remember. He ran a hand through his hair. Okay. That's a lot. But honestly, it explains a few things. Like what? He glanced around, lowering his voice. You ever notice how Mom treated you like a reminder of something painful? Like she was punishing you for just existing? Every day of my life, I said bitterly. Well, I overheard something once, years ago. I didn't think much of it at the time. What was it? I was maybe 10. She was on the phone with someone and she said, she's not like him. She doesn't even look like him. Thank God. Then she hung up and cried for hours. My stomach twisted. You think she was talking about him? The guy in the photo? Max nodded. Yeah. And now I'm wondering if you weren't just her teenage mistake. Maybe you were her heartbreak. We sat in silence for a moment. Then I said, I need to know who he is. I need to know the truth. Max leaned in. Then we find out. Together. That night, we started digging. Max and I combed through boxes in our mom's attic while she was out. Old papers, yearbooks, receipts, anything. And then we found it. A letter. Folded and tucked inside a worn copy of Wuthering Heights. It was addressed to my mom, postmarked 2002. Emma, I don't blame you. I never did. You were scared, but not a day goes by that I don't wonder about her, our daughter. Does she look like you? Does she know I wanted to be in her life? I'm in town for the holidays. I'll be at the Blue House on the 24th, just in case you change your mind. No name. Just an initial. D. My hands trembled. Max. That was 2 days before Christmas, the year I turned 3. She never went, he whispered. She never even told you. She let him disappear. Max looked at me with a mixture of pity and rage. Do you think she even read the letter? I nodded slowly. Oh, she read it. She kept it all these years. She knew he wanted me. That hit me like a freight train. He wanted me. All my life, I believed I was a burden, a regret. But what if that wasn't true? What if I had a father out there who wanted me, and I just never knew? The pieces were falling into place, and the picture they formed was both heartbreaking and full of hope. But this was just the beginning, because the truth, it wasn't buried. It was just hidden behind years of guilt and silence, and I was finally ready to dig it up. Max and I sat on the attic floor, surrounded by dusty boxes and the hum of a quiet house that suddenly felt like a museum of secrets. I stared at the letter again, my fingers tracing the faded ink. Our daughter. In town for the holidays. Something about that line wouldn't let me go. The Blue House. He said he'd be at the Blue House. Max nodded. Near Jordan's grandparents' place, right? I pulled out my phone and opened the Maps app. I typed in the town name and zoomed in around the area Jordan had mentioned. A small neighborhood of modest homes, nestled near a lake. And then I saw it. A pin labeled, Blue House Retreat, Bed and Breakfast. Max leaned over my shoulder. That's gotta be it. Could be a coincidence, I said. But my heart was already racing. Only one way to find out, he replied. We go. It took some convincing, but by the next morning, we were in Max's car driving 3 hours north. The closer we got, the more I felt this strange tug, like something invisible was pulling me toward a version of myself I'd never been allowed to meet, one that had been stolen from me before I even had a chance to know who I was. We pulled up to the Blue House just after noon. It was charming. Light blue with white shutters, a wraparound porch, and a swing that creaked in the wind. A woman in her 60s greeted us at the front desk. Her name tag read, Marlene. Welcome to the Blue House Retreat, she said cheerfully. Staying the night? I shook my head. Actually, I was hoping you might help me with something. It's kind of a long shot. Her smile didn't fade. Try me. I pulled the photo from my bag and handed it to her. Do you remember this man? She squinted at it, then gasped softly. Oh my goodness, that's Daniel. My chest tightened. Daniel? Daniel Rowan. He used to come every year around the holidays. Always stayed in room 4. Such a polite man. I haven't seen him in a while, though. I felt dizzy. Max stepped closer. Do you know where he lives? She hesitated. He mentioned he moved to Oregon a few years ago, but I might still have his emergency contact form in our old files. She disappeared into the back office. I turned to Max. Daniel. D. That has to be him. I think you just found your real dad, he said quietly. Marlene returned a few minutes later, holding a yellowed file folder. Here we are. Daniel Rowan. And look. He left an email address. I took a photo of the form, heart pounding. Back in the car, I stared at the email address like it was a bomb waiting to go off. What do I even say? I whispered. Max shrugged. Maybe the truth? So I typed, subject. I think I'm your daughter. Hi, I'm sorry to reach out like this, and I understand if this is confusing or unexpected. My name is Claire. I found a photo of you with my mother, Emma, and a letter you wrote her in 2002. I think you might be my biological father. If I'm wrong, I apologize for the intrusion. But if I'm right, please know I'm not asking for anything except the truth. Claire. I stared at the screen for a long time before hitting send, and then the wait began. The reply came just after midnight. One sentence. Claire, I've been waiting 23 years to hear from you. I sat there in bed, holding my phone like it was a lifeline. He didn't deny it. He didn't panic. He just accepted it, like it was something he had always hoped for. Tears blurred my vision. I wasn't a mistake. I wasn't unwanted. He had waited. And now, everything was about to change. I must have read his reply 100 times that night. Claire, I've been waiting 23 years to hear from you. There was something in those words, not just relief, but grief too. The kind of grief that only grows with time. The kind you carry alone, quietly, because you think you have to. I replied immediately. Hi, Daniel. Thank you for responding. I have so many questions, and honestly, I don't even know where to start. Can we talk? Maybe a video call? I'd really like to hear your story. He answered less than an hour later, suggesting we talk the next morning. It was already 2 a.m., but I couldn't sleep. My thoughts were a tangled mess of hope, fear, and curiosity. What kind of man was he? Why did my mom keep him a secret? And how different would my life have been if she hadn't? At exactly 9 a.m., my laptop screen lit up with an incoming call. I took a deep breath and answered, and there he was, Daniel. Older than in the photo, of course. His hair had gone mostly gray, and there were lines around his eyes. But the moment he smiled, that same warm, gentle smile, I felt a jolt in my chest. He looked like me, and I hadn't realized how much I'd been waiting to see that. Hi, Claire, he said, voice soft but steady. Hi. I breathed. There was a long pause, the kind where neither person knows what to say first. I've imagined this moment for so long, he finally said. You're so grown up. Well, I'm 26, I said, laughing nervously. He smiled again. I know. I counted every year. I swallowed the lump in my throat. Can I ask you something? Why weren't you there? In my life? His face changed. Not guilty. Just deeply, deeply sad. I tried, he said. Your mother and I were together for almost 2 years. We weren't perfect, but we loved each other. When she found out she was pregnant with you, she panicked. She didn't tell me right away. When she finally did, I told her I wanted to be there, that I'd do anything. What happened? She disappeared, he said simply. I came home one day and she was gone. No note, no forwarding address, nothing. I searched for her. I even filed a missing person report, but she didn't want to be found. My stomach twisted. She never told me any of that. I wrote her letters for years, he said. Sent them to her old address. I came back to the Blue House every Christmas hoping she'd show up. The last letter I wrote, the one you found, that was my last attempt. I didn't hear anything, so I assumed, he stopped, voice cracking, that she decided to raise you without me. Tears burned my eyes. She chose to keep him away. I always believed she resented me because of what I cost her, but now I wondered if the truth was worse. Maybe she resented me because of what she took from me. A father who wanted me, a life that could have been different. I'm sorry, I whispered. Claire, he said gently. You don't have to apologize for her choices. I nodded slowly. Do you have a family now? I never married, he said. Not after her. I dated, sure, but no kids. No one else ever really felt right. I always thought, if I was lucky, maybe one day you'd find me, and now you have. I let out a shaky breath. So what now? He smiled again. Now we get to know each other, if you want. I didn't hesitate. I do. We talked for over 2 hours that day, about everything. My childhood, his work, my love for writing, his terrible cooking skills. It felt easy, natural, like we were picking up a conversation that had been paused, not broken. When we finally hung up, I stared at the blank screen, stunned by how full my heart felt. But that peace didn't last long, because less than an hour later my phone rang again. It was Max. He sounded panicked. You need to come to the hospital, he said. It's Mom. My heart dropped. What happened? She collapsed. They're running tests. They think it might be stress-related, but I'm on my way, I said, grabbing my keys. And just like that, the emotional ground I'd just found beneath my feet started shifting again, because whatever peace I'd gained was about to be tested. The drive to the hospital felt like moving through molasses. Every red light stretched forever. Every thought ran in circles. I kept hearing her voice, not from childhood, not from Christmas, but from that one voicemail she left me months ago after we hadn't spoken for a while. You think the world owes you love just because you exist, Claire? Well, guess what? It doesn't. You have to earn it. At the time, I deleted it, furious. But now, that bitterness had melted into something murkier. Confusion, guilt, anger, love, all tangled up like fishing wire in my chest. When I arrived at the hospital, Max was pacing in the waiting room. She's stable, he said before I could even ask. They think it was a panic attack combined with exhaustion, but they're keeping her overnight to monitor her heart. I sat down hard on the nearest chair. How did it happen? She was in the kitchen, he said. I came over to check on her and she just fell. She hadn't slept, barely eaten, kept mumbling about being alone, about how she messed everything up. I didn't know what to say. Part of me wanted to cry. Part of me wanted to walk out and not look back. And then the nurse came out. She's asking for Claire. Max looked at me. You don't have to. I know, I said quietly, but I want to. Her room was dim, lit only by the monitor's glow and a soft bedside lamp. She looked small, fragile in a way I wasn't used to seeing, like a deflated version of the woman who used to slam doors and say things that cut like knives. Her eyes opened when I stepped inside. I knew you'd come, she whispered. I sat at the edge of the bed. Why did you ask for me? She looked away. Because you're the only one who doesn't pretend I'm someone I'm not. I didn't reply. She turned her head slowly, tears in her eyes. You found him, didn't you? I blinked. You knew? She nodded. I saw the photo was missing, and the letter. I knew what you'd do once you saw them. I felt heat rise in my chest. Then why? Why did you keep him from me? She closed her eyes. Because I was afraid. Afraid of what? That he'd love me? No, she said hoarsely. Afraid that you'd love him more. Her words hit me like a slap. You took him away from me because you were jealous? She winced. It wasn't supposed to be like that. I was 19, Claire. 19. No parents. No help. And he had everything. Support. Money. Options. Then why didn't you let him help you? Because I didn't want to be the girl who needed rescuing, she snapped, then coughed from the effort. I wanted to be strong, independent. But when I saw how easily he could give you everything I couldn't, I panicked. I thought if he stayed, you'd grow up loving him and resenting me. So I left. My throat tightened. You didn't give me a choice. I know. You made me believe I was unwanted, that I ruined your life. Tears slipped down her cheeks. I was cruel. I was wrong, but I didn't know how to undo it, and the longer I waited, the more impossible it felt. I stared at her, searching for the mother I'd needed all these years, and for the first time she looked human, broken, flawed, regretful. I stood slowly. I don't hate you, but I can't fix you. I don't want you to, she said, voice cracking. I just don't want to die with you thinking I never loved you. I hesitated at the door. You did love me, I said. But you loved your pride more. Then I walked out. Max found me in the parking lot 15 minutes later, staring up at the night sky. You okay? No, I said, but I will be. He nodded. You going to see him again, Daniel? I looked at him. Yeah, I think I need to. And for the first time in a long, long time, I felt something I hadn't felt in years. Hope. 3 days later, I stood at gate 17 with my boarding pass in hand, heart pounding like it was trying to warn me of something. Daniel had invited me to Oregon. I'd like to show you where I live, he said during our last video call. It's quiet, but it's home, and I want to share it with you. No pressure. But it was pressure. The good kind. The terrifying kind. Meeting your father for the first time at 26 wasn't something you could prepare for. There's no script, no handbook. Just two people with a gap between them so wide it could swallow years whole. And yet, when my plane landed and I saw him standing at the arrivals gate with a handmade sign that said, Claire, finally, in thick, clumsy handwriting, I laughed so hard I almost cried. He looked nervous, more than I was, maybe. Like he didn't know if he should hug me or shake my hand. So I hugged him. And something clicked. Not fixed, not magically healed, but real. He smelled like coffee and cedarwood. His coat was too big. His hands were cold. But his smile? That was warmth I hadn't felt in decades. His house was everything he'd described. A cozy 2-bedroom cottage surrounded by pine trees, with mismatched furniture and walls covered in bookshelves. Sorry, it's a mess, he said as I stepped inside. I didn't exactly decorate for company. It's perfect, I said, and I meant it. Over dinner, he told me stories, not just about his life, but about her, my mother. Back when they were young, before things fell apart. She was brilliant, he said, swirling pasta on his fork. Funny. Stubborn as hell. She used to sing to you when she thought I wasn't listening. Off key. Every time. I smiled, even as something inside me ached. She never told me any of that. She never forgave herself for leaving, he said softly. But she couldn't admit that, so she hardened, made you the scapegoat, not because you deserved it, but because that was the only way she knew how to survive. That night, I couldn't sleep. I lay in the guest room staring at the ceiling, trying to process everything. The way he said my name, the way he looked at me like I mattered, the photos on his mantle of everything but me, all the life we lost, all the time we couldn't get back, and still, I felt something else, gratitude. He could have turned bitter, cold. He could have blamed me, but he didn't. He waited, and now, here we were, not trying to rewrite the past, but finally giving it a voice. The next day, we walked along a trail near his house. The sky was overcast, the air crisp with pine and silence. Can I ask you something? I said. Anything. Why didn't you fight harder to find me? He stopped walking. I asked myself that 1,000 times, he said, looking out at the trees. I should have tried more. I should have hired a private investigator, searched every city. But part of me was scared that if I found you, you'd hate me for not being there, that I'd ruined my one shot. I nodded slowly. I don't hate you, I said. I just needed to know you. He smiled, Then I'll spend the rest of my life making sure you do. Later that afternoon, he showed me an old wooden box he'd kept in a drawer. Inside were trinkets, a hospital bracelet with my birth date, a dried daisy, a photo of my mom holding me as a baby, a drawing of a little girl in crayon, the kind you find at a garage sale made by someone else's child. I used to imagine you'd grow up and draw me a picture, he said. This was just wishful thinking. I blinked fast. It's beautiful. You were always real to me, he said quietly, even when I didn't get to see you. That night, I called Max. She's home, he said. Tired. Quiet, but different. I think your visit shook something loose. I don't know what to say to her now. You don't have to say anything, Max replied. Just live your life. Let her watch you be okay. That'll be louder than anything else. And for the first time in forever, I believed I would be. I wasn't the unwanted daughter. I wasn't the mistake. I was someone's wish. When I got back home a few days later, everything felt different. The streets were the same. My apartment still smelled faintly like the candle I forgot to blow out. My phone buzzed with the same work emails, same missed calls, same life. But I had changed. It wasn't dramatic, not a thunderbolt or epiphany, just clarity. Like someone had finally wiped a foggy mirror, and I could see myself for the first time without all the fingerprints of other people's expectations. I was still angry, still sad, but I was no longer confused about where I came from or who I wanted to be moving forward. The next morning, Max came over with 2 coffees and a box of donuts. So? He said, eyes wide. How was Oregon? I smiled. Honestly, it felt like the beginning of something I didn't know I needed. He grinned. So he's good? He's great, I said. He listens. He asks questions. He doesn't talk to me like I'm broken or a burden. Max sat down slowly. I'm glad. You deserve that. There was a beat of silence. I want you to meet him, I said. His eyes flicked up. Really? Yeah, you're my brother. And even if we don't share the same father, we still share everything else. And I want him to know that part of me too. He nodded slowly. Okay, I'd like that. I bit into a jelly donut, powdered sugar dusting my shirt, and for a moment, it felt like we were kids again, before everything got complicated. Then Max said something that made my heart pause. By the way, Mom wants to see you. I froze. Why? She said she has something to give you, something from the past. She told me to tell you that it's your choice, and that she won't push. I wasn't sure I was ready. I had finally started healing. Seeing Daniel had opened a new part of my life, and I wasn't eager to walk back into the house where I was made to feel like a shadow. But I was curious. What could she possibly want to give me now? 2 days later, I pulled into her driveway. The house looked smaller than I remembered. The front yard, once meticulously kept, was now patchy and overgrown. Something about it made me sad. Not for her exactly, but for what could have been. She opened the door before I even knocked. Hi, she said softly. Hi. She looked thinner, tired. Her eyes were swollen, like she hadn't been sleeping well. I won't keep you long, she said, stepping aside. The living room was exactly the same beige couch, same dusty shelves, but something had changed in the air. Less tension. More stillness. She handed me a small box, wrapped in faded pink paper. I meant to give this to you years ago, she said, but I was too proud and too scared. I opened it carefully. Inside was a stack of letters, dozens, addressed to me, from Daniel. I kept them, she said, all of them. He sent one every year on your birthday. I never mailed them. I told myself I was protecting you, but really, I was protecting me. I felt my throat tighten as I picked one up. It was dated the year I turned 10. Hi, Claire. You're 10 today. Double digits. I hope you like drawing or singing or building things. I used to make forts out of blankets when I was 10. I wonder if you like stars, like your mom did, or scary movies like I do. Someday, I hope you'll read this, and maybe you'll think of me for just a second and know I never stopped loving you. Tears rolled down my cheeks. She watched me, eyes full of something unfamiliar. Humility. I can't undo the past, she whispered, but I want you to know I did love you. I just didn't know how to show it without losing myself. I didn't say anything. I couldn't. Instead, I held the box close and walked out the door, not out of anger, not out of victory, but out of peace. Some wounds never fully heal, some relationships remain fractured, but for the first time, I didn't need her approval, her apology, or her validation. I had my truth, and I had my father's words. That was enough. That night, I stayed up late reading every single letter. Each one was like a time capsule, a glimpse into the life Daniel imagined for me, year after year, even when he had no way of knowing who I was becoming. In one, he wrote about seeing a little girl at the park with wild curls like mine and wondering if I liked the swings or the slide more. In another, he described his favorite book and said he hoped I was the kind of person who got lost in stories. He shared moments, grief over losing his parents, joy when he opened his own art studio, even the mundane things like trying to cook lasagna and failing miserably. He didn't know me, but he wrote to me like I was already real in his heart. And as I read them, I cried for every birthday I spent thinking I was alone, for every time I stared at a door hoping someone would show up, for every lie I believed about being hard to love. He was always there. I just didn't know it. The next weekend, Daniel came to visit. It was surreal watching him walk into my apartment like it was the most natural thing in the world. He brought flowers, not the store-bought kind, but ones he picked himself. Wild, uneven, messy. I wasn't sure what you liked, he said. So I brought everything. We spent hours walking around the city. I showed him my favorite bookstore, the tiny diner with the world's best pancakes, and the bridge I used to sit under when I needed to cry and not be found. I wish I could have been there for all of this, he said quietly. You're here now, I said. That night, he met Jordan. They shook hands, and Daniel said, I hear you take good care of her. Jordan smiled. She kind of takes care of me too. Daniel nodded. Good. Then you're doing it right. And I realized this was the first time I'd ever seen a man talk about me with pride. Not performance, not pressure, just love, quiet and certain. Later, we sat in my living room, just the two of us. He looked around, then said, Can I ask you something a little scary? I nodded. Would you ever want to meet your grandparents? My side, I mean. My sister lives in Vermont. She has 2 daughters. They've known about you since you were born. I didn't hide you. I blinked. Wait, they know I exist? He smiled. They've been asking about you every year. I didn't even realize I was crying until he leaned over and handed me a tissue. There's a whole family that already loves you, he said. You don't have to do anything to earn it. Just be who you are. Meeting them was like stepping into a warm hug. His sister Janet pulled me in the second I walked through the door. You look just like your mom used to at your age, minus the scowl. We all laughed. Her daughters, my cousins, showed me photo albums, shared stories, asked questions. No one tiptoed around me. No one made me feel like an outsider. They just welcomed me. And for the first time, I started to understand what people meant when they said chosen family. Not the one you're born into, but the one who sees you and says, you belong here. A few weeks later, I found myself at my mother's door again, not out of obligation, but out of choice. She looked surprised to see me. I just wanted to tell you something, I said. I met him. I met them. His family. My family. She nodded slowly. And? They're kind. They're open. And they love me. She swallowed hard. I'm glad. There was a pause. I forgive you, I said. She blinked. You, what? I forgive you. Not because what you did was okay, but because I refuse to carry it with me anymore. I've got better things to hold now. She didn't cry. She didn't beg. She just whispered, thank you. I turned to leave and she called after me. Claire? Yeah? I'm proud of you, even if I didn't know how to say it before. I nodded. I know, and I meant it. Because I finally did. 6 months later, I stood at the edge of a small lake in Vermont, barefoot in the grass, holding a cup of coffee as the sun rose behind the trees. Daniel was inside the cabin cooking breakfast, or trying to at least, and Janet's daughters were still asleep upstairs, their laughter from the night before echoing faintly in my mind. I never imagined peace could look like this. Not loud, not cinematic, just still. Back home, everything had shifted. My mom started therapy. Not for me, for herself. It wasn't a miracle overnight, but she began calling Max just to ask how he was doing, not to guilt him or complain. She even sent me a postcard once, from a weekend retreat she'd gone to voluntarily, with just one line, trying to be better. Thank you for letting me try. It wasn't redemption, but it was real. And real was enough. Jordan and I had moved in together officially. No drama, no speeches, just a mutual agreement that your place or mine was starting to sound silly when we both wanted to wake up in the same bed. Even that felt quietly revolutionary. After years of surviving under tension, drama, manipulation, choosing a life without chaos felt like rebellion. And joy? Joy became a quiet kind of bravery. One evening, as Daniel and I sat on the dock skipping stones, he said, You know, for a long time, I kept thinking about all the moments we lost. Your first steps. First day of school, your high school graduation. I stared out at the water. I used to mourn those too. He turned to me. Do you still? I thought about it, then shook my head. Not anymore. Because I realized something. What? You didn't miss me. You missed a version of me that never got to exist. He looked confused. I wasn't happy on my first day of school. I was terrified, and I cried the whole way home. I didn't want to be there. And on my graduation day, Mom got into a fight with Max right before we left, so I didn't even smile in the photos. I turned to him. Those weren't happy moments. They were just moments. He was quiet. And now, I added, now I get to have memories that are happy. With you, with this family, with myself. Daniel looked like he might cry, but he just nodded. You're incredible. You know that? I smiled. I'm getting there. The following week, Max came to visit us in Vermont. Daniel greeted him like he was his own son. No hesitation. No weirdness. The 3 of us went hiking, had terrible barbecue, and watched old sci-fi movies under a blanket of stars. At one point, Max said quietly, I didn't know it could feel like this. Like what? I asked. Like being in a family, not performing one. That stuck with me, because he was right. We had spent so long pretending, tiptoeing, managing people's moods just to keep the peace. But now, we got to be messy, honest, whole. A few days before I was set to return home, Daniel handed me an envelope. "Don't open it until you're on the plane," he said. I gave him a look. Cryptic. I like it. At 30,000 feet in the air, I finally opened it. Inside was a letter and a key. "Claire, this is the key to the studio behind my house, the one I always said I'd turn into a creative space someday. I want it to be yours, not just because you're my daughter, but because I believe in you. I read everything you've written. Yes, your blog too. And I think the world needs your voice. You don't owe me anything. You never did. But if you ever want a place that's only yours, where you can write, paint, yell at the walls, this is it. No expectations, just love. D." I held the key in my palm and felt something shift. Not an ending, a beginning. And for the first time in my life, I wasn't chasing love. I was walking toward it, freely, fully, and without fear. Back in the city, I couldn't stop thinking about the studio. Daniel's words echoed in my mind every time I opened my laptop or sat down with a journal. That little key on my desk felt like an invitation I hadn't quite accepted yet, not just to a physical place, but to a different version of myself. A version that wasn't afraid to create, to take up space, to live unapologetically. It scared me, but it also thrilled me. Jordan noticed right away. "You've been pacing a lot," he said one morning, sipping his coffee. I stopped mid-step. "I'm not pacing." He raised an eyebrow. I sighed. "Okay, maybe I'm pacing. I don't know what to do with this opportunity." "Yes, you do," he said calmly. "You're just afraid of doing it, and that's okay. I've never had something that was just for me," I admitted. Jordan smiled, set down his mug, and pulled me into a hug. "Then maybe it's time you did." So I went back. A month later, I took a week off work, packed a suitcase, and drove to Daniel's house with the key in my hand and a notebook full of blank pages. The studio was perfect in its imperfection. Dusty wood floors, exposed beams, a huge window that overlooked the trees. It smelled like paint and possibility. We spent the first 2 days cleaning it out. Daniel insisted on doing it together. "If this is going to be yours, we need to get all my clutter out of the way first." I laughed when we found 3 broken fans, 2 unopened yoga mats, and an actual disco ball. "I was gonna throw a party once," he explained sheepishly. "Didn't happen." By the 3rd day, the space was empty and ready. I wrote like I was breathing for the first time, sometimes for 10 hours straight, sometimes just a paragraph before I sat in silence, staring out the window with tears in my eyes. I wrote about my childhood, about Christmases filled with silence, about birthdays where I'd pretend I was sick so no one would come over and notice the empty chairs. I wrote about Max, how he had unknowingly saved me 1,000 times just by knocking on my door and saying, "Wanna play?" I wrote about my mom, not as a villain, but as a complicated, frightened, angry woman who did the best she could and often failed. And I wrote about Daniel, the kind of father who waited, the kind of man who chose patience over pride. One night, Daniel came into the studio with 2 mugs of hot chocolate. He sat beside me watching the snow fall outside. "You look lighter," he said quietly. "I think I am," I said, for the first time ever. He nodded. "Do you want to stay longer?" I looked around the room. "Yeah, I think I do." Word got around the small town. People started asking what I was writing. A few artists from the area came by to peek into the studio. One woman, a retired teacher, offered to start a weekly writing circle. By the end of the month, we had 6 regulars, 3 rotating guests, and a giant chalkboard full of prompts. We laughed. We cried. We shared stories that had been bottled up for years. The studio wasn't just mine anymore. It was ours. And somehow that made it even more sacred. Back home, Jordan visited every other weekend. He'd bring groceries, new books, and once, a puppy. "She looked lonely in the shelter," he said with a sheepish grin. "We named her Maple. She became the unofficial mascot of the studio, sleeping beside our feet during sessions, barking when someone read a particularly emotional line like she felt it. Even Daniel, who had never been much of a dog person, started sneaking her treats when he thought no one was looking. One afternoon, I got a message from Max. "Mom wants to come visit the studio." I stared at the screen for a long time. Then I wrote back, "Okay. Tell her to bring an open mind," because I was ready to show her the life I had built, not out of spite, but out of resilience, out of love, for myself, for the people who held me up, and for the girl I used to be, the one who waited for someone to show up, and who finally learned how to be that someone for herself. The day my mother visited the studio, I cleaned it like it was a cathedral, not because I wanted to impress her, but because this place, this room, these walls deserved respect. It had become sacred ground, a place where I had rewritten my story, word by word. A place where I'd watched others do the same, where pain had turned into poetry, where shame had cracked and let the light in. She arrived an hour late, of course. I saw her car pull up through the big window. She sat inside for a long time before finally stepping out, clutching her purse like it was armor. I met her at the door. "Hi," I said simply. She looked around the room. "This is nice." I nodded. "It is." There was an awkward silence. I didn't fill it. I'd learned that not all silences are bad. Some are invitations to speak truth. She finally stepped inside, slowly, eyes scanning the floorboards, the ceiling, The bookshelves I'd built with Daniel. You really did all this? With help. She touched the corner of a painting someone had left behind. And you, right here? Every day. She nodded, still not meeting my eyes. I brought something, she said, reaching into her purse. My guard went up. Just a little. But what she pulled out wasn't sharp. It was a small, leather-bound notebook. I started writing, she said quietly. After everything with the hospital, the letters you found, the truth, coming out, she handed it to me. It's not for you to read. Not yet. I'm not ready for that. But I wanted you to know I'm trying. I took the notebook in my hands, heart thudding. Why now? She took a shaky breath. Because I saw what you've done. Not just here, but with yourself. You turned all that pain into something useful, something honest. She looked around again. You didn't just survive, you built. Her voice cracked. And I realized, I've spent so much of my life avoiding mirrors. But this place, this feels like a mirror I can't run from. I said nothing, just held her gaze. And for once, she didn't look away. I was wrong, Claire, she said. About so many things, but most of all, about you. I nodded slowly. Thank you for saying that. She gestured to one of the chairs by the window. Can I sit? Just for a while? Of course. So we sat. Not as mother and daughter tangled in old wounds, but as two women, flawed, exhausted, open. We talked for over an hour, about Max, about Vermont, about Daniel. She didn't speak with bitterness, just quiet awe, like hearing about him was both painful and healing all at once. I always told myself he'd forgotten you, she admitted. That it would be easier if I believed that, but he didn't. And now I see what that love looks like. I smiled gently. It's not too late, you know. She looked up. For what? For you to find your own peace. She didn't answer, but her eyes glistened with something that felt close to hope. When she left, she paused at the door. You're stronger than I ever was. I had to be. She nodded slowly. Thank you for letting me see this, even if I didn't deserve it. I watched her walk away, her figure slowly shrinking in the distance. And for the first time, her absence didn't feel like abandonment. It felt like space. Space I could fill with whatever I wanted now. And I chose peace. Weeks passed after my mother's visit, and life began to settle into something I never thought I'd have. Consistency. The studio was thriving. What had started as a personal sanctuary had turned into a local creative hub. Writers, poets, painters. A teenage girl who'd been too shy to speak the first day was now writing short stories that left the whole room in tears. People kept showing up, not because they had to, but because they wanted to. There's something magical about spaces where everyone is allowed to be fully themselves. No masks. No apologies, just stories, raw and unpolished, spilling into the air like truths that had waited their whole lives to be heard. And through it all, Daniel was there, sometimes in the background, fixing a leaky faucet or bringing in sandwiches, sometimes in the circle, sharing quiet reflections about grief or dreams he never got to chase. He never tried to make up for lost time. He just made this time count. One evening, after our session ended and everyone had left, I found him standing alone at the window, looking out at the stars. You okay? I asked, walking over. He didn't look at me, just said, Today would have been your grandmother's birthday. I stood beside him, placing a hand on his shoulder. She would have loved you, he said. You remind me of her. She was a fighter, but soft too, gentle when it mattered. I didn't know what to say, so I said the truth. I wish I could have met her. She used to say that no matter how dark things got, there was always light if you knew where to look. He turned to me. You're that light, Claire. My eyes filled instantly. I spent so many years wondering if I'd ever find you, he continued. And now I wake up every morning knowing you're here, that you're okay, that you're you. I hugged him tightly, overwhelmed by how safe I felt in his arms, and I realized something. He wasn't just my father, he was my home. A few days later, Jordan and I hosted our first ever open mic night at the studio. We expected maybe 15 people, 60 showed up. Max came early to help set up chairs, and when he walked in with Mom behind him, I froze. She looked nervous, holding a small plate of cookies. I brought something, she said quietly. I smiled. Thanks. She didn't push, didn't hover. She just sat in the back row, hands folded tightly in her lap. When I got on stage to open the night, I looked out and saw her face. Anxious, unsure, but there. I took a deep breath. I used to believe silence was safer than honesty, I said. That if I kept my stories to myself, no one could use them against me. But silence doesn't protect. It just buries. A pause. This place, this room, was born from the noise inside me that refused to stay quiet. And if you're here tonight, I want you to know, your story matters, even if it's messy, even if it's unfinished, especially if it's unfinished. The applause was soft at first, then swelled. I stepped down and let the others take the mic. Some read poems, others sang. One man simply told the story of how he learned to forgive himself after losing a friend. And then, to my shock, my mother stood up. She walked slowly to the front, her hands shaking, and said, I've never spoken in front of a group before, but I've been learning lately that fear is just another way we stay stuck. She pulled a folded paper from her pocket. This is a letter I wrote to my daughter a long time ago. I never gave it to her. I thought it was too late, but I think I was just afraid she wouldn't care. She looked right at me. But she cared more than I deserved. Her voice trembled as she read it. Regrets, apologies, love. Not perfect, but real. When she finished, the room was silent. Then someone clapped, then another, until the whole room was on its feet. She walked back to her seat, and as she passed me, she whispered, "Thank you for letting me try." I squeezed her hand, and that moment, that impossible moment, felt like the closing of a wound I thought would never stop bleeding. I was no longer surviving my story. I was living it. 1 year later, on a crisp spring afternoon, we held the grand reopening of the studio, now officially named the Blue House Collective. The name wasn't just a nod to where it all started, it was a tribute to the letter, the house, the choice Daniel made to keep showing up even when no one answered the door. We'd painted the outside a soft blue, Jordan built new shelves, Max created the logo, and my mother? She donated the chairs, said she wanted people to sit in something solid, poetic, unintentionally. The day of the event, the space was overflowing. People came from all over, not just locals, but writers and artists who'd heard about our story online. And right there in the center of it all stood Daniel, holding a mug of coffee, grinning as he watched the little girl from down the road read a story about dragons and dancing grandmas. He looked over at me and winked. Later that evening, I gave a short speech, something simple, gratitude, a few laughs, a moment of reflection. I kept it short, not because I had nothing to say, but because I knew I'd already said it, in the walls, in the people, in the life I had built word by word. Afterward, I stepped outside for some air. The sunset was painting the sky in gold and lavender, and I stood there barefoot in the grass, just breathing. And then I heard footsteps behind me. It was my mother. She stood beside me silently for a while before speaking. "You were right," she said. I looked over. "About what?" "Love isn't something you earn. It's something you give." And I didn't know how to give it right for a long time. I didn't respond. Just let her speak. She glanced at me. "But I'm trying. And I'll keep trying, as long as you'll let me." I gave her a small nod. Trying is enough. We watched the sunset together, not as enemies, not even as fully healed family, but as two women who had made peace with the wreckage and planted something new in its place. A few minutes later, Max came out laughing with Jordan and Maple following behind. Daniel soon joined, holding a plate of what he claimed were award-winning brownies. We all sat on the porch, passing jokes, stories, food. And for the first time, there were no sides, just people. Connected not by blood or obligation, but by choice, by truth, by the sacred decision to stay, to listen, to love. That night, I sat alone in the studio with the door open and the stars out. I pulled out my journal and wrote, "Once upon a time, I thought love was something I had to beg for. Now I know it's something I can build. And in building it, I found my voice. I found my father. I found myself. And that was the real gift waiting outside that door all along." I closed the journal, turned off the lights, and stepped out into the cool night air. And I smiled.